We'll start with a panel that will discuss how you can take your idea, that one idea that you had, and make that a real company, a real living, breathing company with people in it. We will follow that with 2 fireside chat sessions with serial entrepreneurs who will help you navigate, who will talk about the challenges that you will face once you start a company and how to best overcome those challenges. So let's start with our panel, and let me invite our moderator for the panel, Aftab Jamil, a partner at BDO, a prominent public accounting firm, and speakers, Brett Galloway, the managing director of Zova Ventures, Greg Head, the CMO of Infusionsoft.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the panel. As Vipin mentioned, that exciting topic, that how do you take that one idea that you have and turn that into a company? And welcome, Pat.
Thank you.
So as Vipin said, that I'm a partner at BDO, and at the firm, I'm also responsible for our firm's technology and life sciences practice here in the US. And in that role, on a daily basis, I get to have the opportunity to meet with the entrepreneurs, both at young and exciting startups, as well as mature companies that are multinational and perhaps publicly held. So I get the opportunity to see those ideas evolving into successful businesses and successful companies. A long time ago, I had read somewhere that some very wise person had said that too many of us are not living our dreams because we live our fears. And for that topic, that how you take that dream, that idea, and turn that into company, we managed to gather a great group of panelists who have had the courage to live their dream as opposed to living their fear. They have taken their ideas and have turned them into companies and have had successful exits. So we're not going to go through into the details of what their list of accomplishments are. I'm sure you can read those as you look at the website. So I think there are people in the audience. I'm sure a number of people sitting here have launched their ventures, have launched their companies, are taking their ideas and trying to turn into those companies. And yet there may be many in the audience who perhaps are evaluating their option, looking for that inspirational spark to get going. And I hope that while we have limited time, these 3 gentlemen will share some insights, and you will walk away with 1 or 2 practical things to launch those particular careers. Obviously, you want to do things differently or change things. And I'm a business professional, not a technologist. And a lot of what Albert Einstein did perhaps make a lot of sense to you guys, and the technologists, but not to me. But he said one thing, and that made a lot of sense to me, and I always try to remember. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, so I'll say it slowly. He said that if you always do what you always did, you will always get what you always got. So let me say that again. If you always do what you always did, you will always get what you always got. So if you want to do things differently and change things, hopefully you'll pay attention to some of the insights that these gentlemen have. So with that, let us get started. On the far side of the stage is Brett Galloway, who's sitting there. In the middle, we have Greg Head. Brett is currently at Zova Ventures and previously was at Cisco. Greg Head is the Chief Marketing Officer at Infusionsoft, and Pat Patterson is the founder and CEO at Agari System. So let's dive right into it. I think what I wanted to do was that perhaps go to the very basics. Somebody is sitting there, have a bright idea, is trying to contemplate what to do next. So Brett, you have done that a couple of times, and perhaps we can start with that. What are some of those fundamental things that an entrepreneur, if they are trying to pursue that idea or even decide whether that is worth going after or not, what are some of the things that should be done, should not be done, and how would one take the very first initial steps to go and start that journey?
It's a great question. And I was really delighted to be able to join the panel today because I'm actually working on new company formation right now, so it's timely for me personally as I've thought about this. I guess, the fundamental advice I would give when you start a venture is figure out the box. And there's actually, it was a great article in Harvard Business Review a while back, and it was called Thinking Inside the Box. And we're all familiar with thinking outside the box, right? Everyone's exhorted to think outside the box, be innovative, think differently. And the point of the article, of course, is that thinking outside the box is overrated. In fact, if you're thinking outside the box, you're completely unconstrained. Much more interesting, of course, when you're starting a venture, to actually define an interesting box, define an interesting space, right? A space where you have the ability to differentiate and deliver value, where you have a market opportunity you can see relative to competitors and relative to transitions in the market. And obviously a box, in terms of, your ability to actually pull together a team to actually execute within that box. And then as sort of the founder of the company, your job then, having drawn that box, is to add texture to that box so you can actually have a team that can actually drill that opportunity. There was a great line from Mark Andreessen. It said, we all hear about pivots, the virtue of pivoting and being, iterative. And of course, his comment was pivot is a fancy word for F up. There's certainly value in iterating, but there's a lot more value in iterating near the gold, as opposed to just, camping out in the middle of the parking lot and starting hunting for gold. So I guess that would be my basic advice. Figure out what that fundamental play is, figure out what the box is, figure out where you're near the gold, and then you can iterate from there.
Okay. Anyone else would like to add to that?
I would agree. I think there's far more businesses that fail by not being able to focus than the number of businesses that fail by not thinking innovatively. If you've got an idea to start a company, the odds are good that you've gone through a lot of the thinking outside the box. There may be more over time, but at some point you've got to get to the focus, and the faster you do, the faster you actually figure out where this thing's going to go.
Yeah, focus is critical, and it means you take an idea that's unconstrained and you're experiencing the freedom of being able to point you and your team into any opportunity. Of course, you've got to define that space, and when you find something, you've even got to be more focused to be able to grow it. So there's only a period of time where you can you have a range to explore before you're putting all the chips on a big bet and going for it.
Okay. A lot of people, I think my perspective is that would be they perhaps come up with the new ideas, new thoughts, something that they want to do differently while they are working wherever they're working in their current roles. Perhaps they see a gap in some unmet need, or they think that there is a better way of doing that. In number of those situations, the companies are launched that way. I wanted to, your patio history at Cisco, a company that you had co-founded and sold to Cisco, and then you have taken that back out, spin out of Cisco. So I was hoping that you can share some perspective with the audience that what are the thought process that perhaps you went through or people should be thinking through while they're at those companies and those ideas come to walk away from potentially a lot of resources that can be available within that big company versus launching it on your own. So what are some of the dynamics that you went through?
I think my simplest advice is don't do it. Honestly. Now, it'd be interesting to hear from Brett, because he was running the entire division that I was in and was a part of that process from senior up in the organization. But I think fundamentally, if you're working on something at your current company, there's a real issue, because if that's valuable, your company doesn't want to let it go. And if you think it's great and your company doesn't want it, you have to really look long and hard and say, how important is it? So that's the first issue. The second is, whatever you do, whatever idea you have, wherever it comes from, you want a clean chain to your intellectual property. You want an acquirer or an investor or a strategic alliance to be able to look and say, I know you own this intellectual property. If you know it, it doesn't matter. If you want someone to give you $100,000 or $100 million, you've got to prove it to them. And so those are the two real issues you have to look at. Now, of course, I didn't take my own advice, but it was kind of a special dynamic. First of all, I had a relationship with the executives, and I'd gone through a process of saying, is it right for Cisco to move forward with this technology? And I think they looked at it and said, there's a lot of promise, but realistically, if you come up with a strategic order of priorities, it's not on that list. And then I told them very clearly, I'm going to run with this idea, and if you want to keep it, that's fine. I can start over again, and there's ways to do that with lawyers to create clean rooms. And they really felt that there was a win-win. But my simple advice is, in most cases, that's not going to be the case. And instead, you should be looking at, I understand this market very well. I'm deep inside of it. I see this adjacent thing that's not my company's business, but I have domain expertise. I have customer contacts. I have ways to think about competitive gaps. That's a fantastic idea. Spinning out the technology is probably going to be wrong for you 9 times out of 10. And if you have any doubts, let me know. I'm happy to talk you through it. But that's a simple advice. Look for an adjacency, or you better have some very special circumstances.
Sure. Because clearly there will be dilemma as to, who owns the IP and what you do and how you have that clean break. Right. Okay.
One thing I would add, as I in fact was there when you spun out, that I think you did, that I think is really important in that scenario, is be open and disclose what you're doing. Right. The worst thing to do, of course, is try to do something behind people's backs. In your case, it was very open, and in fact, frankly, one of the major rationales for doing it was to keep you in the family. So there were actually non-financial, right, aspects. It actually came down to human relationships, as much as anything, to make that deal work.
Okay. So let's turn to you, Greg, that you are currently at Infusionsoft, which you are a chief marketing officer there. And I know under your leadership and with the rest of the executive teams, that company is doing fantastic. And not only in terms of the quantifiable goals of growing the company in terms of revenues or number of employees or your footprint or your market share and so on and so forth, which is very important, and I would love to have your take on that as well. But I was also very intrigued looking at Infusionsoft as to not only it's a growing company, it seems to be, at least the impression that I got, was a very desirable company. Something that, lots of awards for doing this, and that. Well, entrepreneurship is all about taking ideas and innovation and turning that into billings, which you obviously are doing. But it appears that there is a little bit more to that recipe. So I wanted to invite you to speak as to what is it that unique thing that you're doing that where a young and growing company like that is getting that kind of attention, that kind of awards. Is it important, or is it just all fluff? Does it make any difference to you guys in terms of growing the business?
Well, Infusionsoft is a 10-year-old company. These days, we're based in Chandler, Arizona, Phoenix area. We make sales and marketing software for small businesses with fewer than 25 employees, those that don't have IT departments to stitch together mid-market or larger software. So we're kind of like Salesforce plus Marketo for small businesses, the do-it-yourself SaaS model. And we have 400 employees, and we're growing fast and continuing. But it's not, and of course, we have got through our product market fit to early on, and we have our business model figured out. We're growing and scaling. We just landed a round of Series C growth financing capital from Goldman Sachs for $54 million. We're growing fast. But we're also, I've been in the software business for 25 years, helped sell a company to Symantec in the 90s. And those were great growing companies with great people, great markets, but Infusionsoft is the first culture-first company I've worked for, and culture is important, people are important, talent's important, but we're very explicit about it. And as was mentioned in the previous panel, having your mission and purpose and values worked out. And it was part of what created the idea for the company in the first place with the founders, who were very focused on helping small businesses solve their challenges, which weren't getting solved with simple tools or the mid-market solutions. And every step of the way, as seriously as we are about our product and our positioning and our marketing, we're serious about our culture, and culture for us isn't perks and just saying talent and great people. It's very explicitly hiring and firing and living to the vision of our company, which is three specific things: our purpose, the why 400 employees show up every day smiling to do the hard work and meet the challenges, which in our case is to help small businesses succeed. I've been here at the conference for 2 days. It's my third TiEcon. I'm a TiE Charter member. It's part of what I've done and always will do, and every employee believes in that and believes in our success. So there's a why more than ship the product, take the hill, get the exit, make the money. And that's really critical and has been through every phase of the company. There's also defining our mission. When you're just starting out, from idea to the first reality, that's ship a product. We've got our next mission, and we're achieving our missions. In 4 years, we'll have 100,000 customers and dominate for the market for sales and marketing software for small businesses. And our core values, which anybody could see on our Infusionsoft website. It's easy to say all that stuff, but Goldman's, we live by this, we hire by it, we fire to it, we partner with it. Goldman Sachs was, of all the very interested, serious investors interested in our growth round, was the most, they believed in our core values, they demonstrated their support for what we're doing top to bottom, and they believe it's part of the secret of our success. And it's actually when a lot of companies hit the wall at a certain stage, it's not always because of their product or the market, it's because their people weren't able to scale because they didn't share that common purpose and weren't able to grow around that.
So as a management team, not only the goals and shipping the product out, paying attention to the core values and the culture, sounds like in your case, it's pretty fundamental.
It's 100% of the employees. We spend a lot of time on it, and it really seems weird when you're a startup trying to scrap for revenue, make the product, and do all those other things to survive, to take that day to work on that purpose statement to make sure you're aligned and it's going to last and the team gets it, and do the work for every employee that comes in and continue to do that. But it's the secret of our success. We had 20 employees a month, and we get stronger rather than weaker. Right? It's not just because of the founder's personality or beliefs that day that we can scale. It's because we have a higher explicit culture.
Mm-hmm. Great. Brett, you will be somebody that, in addition to being called serial entrepreneur, probably will also be called a parallel entrepreneur. While you've been involved in companies that you have founded or took the management and had successful exits, turning into a venture capitalist, but you have not stopped setting up additional companies as well. But the two companies that you were a co-founder at Pocketeer and then CEO at Airspace, perhaps share with the audience, what did you learn from those experiences, having done that multiple times, and now you obviously are a little bit on the other side as well. Some of your experiences that you think will be worth sharing with the group so that people can hopefully follow those practical tips on that topic.
Sure. A little bit of background. I was co-founder at a company, Pocketeer. That was in 1996. Turned out to be a great time to start a company. By the way, I think now is better. In 96, it was all about the growth of networking and, the opportunities the market would have created by the growth of the internet. Now it's obviously really being driven around the revolution around mobile and cloud, which I think is actually a larger and more powerful and profound transformation, at least in software businesses. Setting aside the commercial, so we started Pocketeer in 96, and it was a classic technology startup. My partner had an idea. We had an invention, a technology. And we started the company, and we spent basically the next year and a half trying to turn that technical idea into a product. And then we spent the next year trying to find customers for that product. It turned out pretty well, but frankly, that's a crappy way to start a company. Because that job of hunting for a product and hunting for a customer, frankly, should be done up front. And I'm embarrassed to say, Airspace, the company where I joined as CEO, actually did a much better job, and I can take no credit for it, right? I joined later. But in their case, and this was really actually guided by the venture capital firm that started the company, Storm Ventures, started not with a technical idea, but started with an idea of a space, and then actually spent a bunch of time talking to customers. And it is amazing what you learn when you talk to customers. And in fact, in their case, they learned the idea was stupid. But they also learned that it was actually a really good tangential idea, and that's actually what they ultimately funded, and then drew in other investors to share the journey to create Airspace. And what was great for me out of that process, joining midway through the development cycle, is then when we finished the product, we were closer to the puck on features than our competitors, because in fact they talked to the customers. And even more valuable, we had a bunch of people who were sort of pre-wired to be betas. And so it was much easier to get betas for our product. So our product came out, it had better features, and was more stable, and we basically rocketed into the lead, all because they did the upfront work. And almost every startup is started by an engineer, Packeteer was, and engineers, of course, the thing you love is writing software, the thing you hate is talking to customers, but the lesson I drew from the Packeteer and Airspace experience is just how incredibly important it is to do that upfront work, to really figure out the value proposition, the positioning, and figure out if it's going to work, and then in case of enterprise deals, actually pre-wire your initial customers.
Okay, great. So, obviously as a entrepreneur who's founded the company, has done all the things that we've touched so far in this panel discussion as well as in the earlier panels. Obviously you go through various stages. You launch your company, you finally have product, you have some revenue, and then you're trying to grow, and so on and so forth, or trying to do what Infusionsoft is doing in terms of having the culture and the things that should be focused on. As a founder, as a CEO, what are some of the things that an entrepreneur should change as you're going through that different transition, different phases? What are some of the examples that you have seen that you've been at a company that was sold to Cisco, and then you've managed to spin that out? So you've been through that routine a couple of times. Maybe we can start with that, and we'd love to get both your views on that topic as well.
I think perhaps kind of adding on to what Brett said, one of the big lessons I've learned is that the people you need in the early stage of the company are absolutely essential throughout the life of the company, but as the company grows, you have to really change the makeup of the company. And so those early people who are building the product, who are comfortable with the fact that as you talk to customers it changes, and those people who are out there talking to customers saying, we have a dream, we have a vision, we want to understand what you do every day, what your pain is, are fantastic, and that makes up the core of the company. But let's say you get to the point where you're starting to scale sales. At that point, you want somebody who can say, this is a quantitative assessment of my pipeline. These are the business risks across 10 deals, 100 deals, 1,000 deals. That's a very, very different skill set. And in fact, if you miss that skill set, and you're stuck in a mode where you don't really know what the next year is going to look like, and you start to scale, you have tremendous risk. And if you've got the people who are really good at touching individual customers, that's fantastic for incrementing the product and winning individual deals, but you can't really drive the business and make strategic decisions. So I think one of the big lessons that I learned is you really do have to look hard at the team you need for the stage you're in. And the world's best hacker, the world's best product manager is always going to be necessary, but you're going to get to the point, if you're successful, where you've got to start looking at new talent to bring in, and you've got to actually get the company ready for the fact that success breeds change. And if you build a company who is successful and thinks that success is where we're at today and we don't want anything to change, you're going to have a tremendous amount of challenge adapting the organization as your business dynamic changes. And I think that's something that it's very hard to learn until you go through, because you work so hard at each stage and you're so proud of what you've done. It's very difficult sometimes to see how you might have to break that up or factor that, but that's probably the most important thing that I've learned.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's, and once you've been through many stages from early to late, you realize that's, it's as much of the requirement of achieving the dream, going through the stages and doing the things at the stage that you should be doing in market. We all know about, the product adoption curve and getting those early customers and working into a point when everybody's doing it in the mass market, crossing the chasm. But the same thing happens in a company, or a similar thing in stages. So talk about getting the right people for the right stages or the right challenges as you grow. CEOs and founders, the entrepreneur, needs to understand that they're going to go through that change process as well. That's another reason why committing to your big vision, understanding what the mission is now, and having core values, and attaching to that versus how the CEO does things now. I'm a sales guy, I'm doing it. I'm an engineer, I always did it this way. If you don't do that, you're not going to go from entrepreneur in the invention and startup stage to CEO in the growth and scaling stages. And our company's growing more than 50% a year. We were 130 employees 2 years ago, and we're 400, and we'll be over 1,000 in 2 years. It takes, at the CEO level, they have to realize it's an extreme personal development sport, and it's entirely possible. Your investors would rather have founders that want to grow, but the first rule of the game is to understand it's a game, and you got to play for where it's going.
Fantastic.
I completely agree, and in fact, I think the receptivity for the need for change, I think, is crucial. I think to both your points. One other thing I would call out that I think remains true both from the beginning all the way through is the importance of clarity of strategy. One of the things that happens as you grow and you add more people is you can do more stuff. And it's really easy to lose control of what you're doing and try to actually pick too many fights, fight too many battles on too many fronts, and then lose because you've spread your forces too thin. So, and that doesn't mean your strategy is always right? So you have to be, incredibly open to changing the strategy. But the organization needs to be in sync with whatever that strategy is comprehensively. And the essence of strategy is not what do you do, it's what do you don't do. And as you grow, it's really easy to lose track of the set of things you shouldn't be doing because they're not priorities. And so, my advice would be keep the whole team as it gets bigger and bigger, focused on that clarity of strategy.
Okay. Brett, you had mentioned in an earlier comment, I wanted to get all of you to weigh in on that a little bit. And I think that's a question that comes up, and we keep hearing it. But I would rather have you drill that into that a little bit. Is you made a comment, and I've heard that many times, that times are different now. Obviously the valley goes through ups and downs, and we're up cycle, down cycle. You mentioned that you started Packeteer back in 1996, and the time is better now. I wanted to ask you, all of you, that make a comparison perhaps, that how are times different compared to 10 years ago? It's one thing to say times are different. Why do you think they're different? Is it better now for an entrepreneur to launch a venture into a new company? If not, then why not? And if it is, then why? As opposed to just saying it's different.
It's a good question, and clearly right now we're in an upcycle, right? And it's driven by the stock market and economic recovery and so on. And it's obviously it's easier to start a company in an upcycle, but there are great examples of great companies that were started in down cycles. So I think the cycle part isn't the interesting bit from my perspective. It's really about what's going on in the technology world. And I'm a software guy, so if we were talking about semiconductors or clean tech, I wouldn't know anything about that. But around software, what we're going through is a generational shift in compute platforms. The first generation was sort of the tiled room model, right? Mainframes, mini computers, terminals. The second model were PCs and client server, and that morphed into web. We're now in the third generation of computing around mobile and cloud. And every generational shift has completely disrupted the prior generation of companies. Now the difference in this generation and the generation 25 years ago is much more of the world is computerized. So we're basically, over the next decade, going to be rewiring the world. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. And we've certainly seen a bunch of business-to-consumer plays being driven by this transformation, things like Facebook and so on. That's interesting and all. That's not where the money is, right? The money is in business. So the vast power of this transformation is going to happen as these compute platforms move through businesses, and they change the way businesses operate, they change the way businesses sell, they change the way businesses produce. And at the same time that there's a disruption here, there's also a transformation, because as I'm sure all of you know, but it's easy to pass over, these devices are fundamentally more engaging, right? So you can implement workflows you could never implement before. So it opens up a huge new world of users and a huge new world of use cases that you could never make before. So there is just such a vast opportunity here. Frankly, it's just a target-rich environment. And so no matter what the cycle, there's opportunities here to build hundreds of great companies that will change the world.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I may not be able to, the audience may not be able to hear your views on that, but hopefully you'll be able to stick around for a few minutes and people can ask you questions directly as well. I wanted to close the session by sharing with you one quote from Thomas Edison. Obviously, in the ups and downs we talked about, the mistakes that we talked about, go and get stuff when you're trying to launch your ideas into companies. So something that Thomas Edison said that I think is worth keeping in mind and reading. So let me just leave this panel discussion with that one note. He said that many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close to success they were when they gave up. So when the going gets tough, remember that you may not realize that you're very close to that success. With that, may I ask all of you to join me in thanking our panel and give them a good round of applause.